very quick disclaimer. So I made this video for one of my college courses, but since I ended up being really proud with how it came out, I decided to upload it here. But since this is a school project, I just wanted to quickly throw a few things out there. If you somehow happen to recognize me from school, whether that be as a classmate or as a professor, for my safety and yours, please do not comment anything related to my real name, my school, or my professors. If you want to talk to me in the comments, you can call me Leafy. Also, you probably can guess it from the title of this video, but trigger warning for talk of a whole bunch of ableism and a very brief mention of suicide. Okay, that's all I have. Bye bye.
Autism's a pretty widely known disability. You've likely heard of it. Maybe you've read a book or watched a movie with an autistic character in it, are related to or are friends with someone who's autistic, or you're autistic yourself. Whatever the case is, it's no secret that society's general view of autism is that it is bad. That isn't necessarily the case though. See, the main problem with autism isn't autism itself, but rather the way society has labeled it as being a problem. Let's begin with a brief overview of what autism even is. According to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, autism is a developmental disability that affects how one communicates with others and processes the world. Common autistic traits include prolonged and extreme interest in topics that some may find odd, difficulties with starting and completing tasks, hypersensitivity to stimuli like light and sound, and struggling to understand tone or figurative language. This is, of course, a non-exhaustive list, but it's important to remember that autism affects every autistic person differently, which leads me into the first stigma I'd like to break down: functioning labels. You may have heard autistic people being described as high functioning or low functioning depending on the level of support they require. However, these labels were unfortunately not created with the needs of autistic people in mind, but are rather applied in a way that implies autistic people with less visible symptoms are more favorable than autistic people who require more support. Autistic author Rachel Elkins argues that functioning labels create a divide where one part of the community is implicitly told that their differences mean they are more broken or defective, with the other half of the community being identified as not that bad. To branch off of this, the term autism spectrum is sometimes misinterpreted as being a linear model, that autism is something you have more or less of. A more accurate depiction of the autism spectrum would be something more like this, which better illustrates the differences in how autistic people can experience the disability. Two autistic people's wheels may look completely different from one another, or they may look almost exactly alike. While all autistic people have different experiences, they all deserve to be listened to. Both of these examples represent autism stigma at an interpersonal level. However, I also want to take some time to explain autism stigma at an institutional level. See, most of the funds for autism research are not dedicated towards services to help autistic people, but instead they're spent on things like researching cures and other ways to prevent autism. Take a look at this pie chart from the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee that shows where the money from 2020's US autism research went towards. Out of the near $419 million spent that year, only 12% of the money went towards researching ways to help improve autistic people's quality of life. Compare this to the 18% spent on looking into preventions for autism, and the whopping 45% that was spent on researching the biology of autism in order to find a cure. But why does such a disparity exist in the first place? Unfortunately, autistic people are viewed as tragedies in the medical field, their potential having been ruined since birth just because of their disability. This is especially true for autistic children, who are made out to be burdens by many autism organizations. Autism Speaks is among the most notable of these, with them having a history of posting some pretty wild things about autistic kids.
I am autism. I have no interest in right or wrong. I derive great pleasure out of your loneliness. I will fight to take away your hope. I will plot to rob you of your children and your dreams.
I had sat in the car for about 15 minutes and actually contemplated putting Jody in the car and driving off the George Washington Bridge.
These are re-uploads, by the way. Almost all traces of these clips have been completely scrubbed from their website. I wonder why. Autistic people also struggle with just getting a diagnosis in general, and there's a lot of factors that go into this, including racial and gender biases. Autism advocate Lisa Jo Rudy has found that autistic women are 4 times less likely to be diagnosed than men, and black children are 2.6 times more likely to remain undiagnosed compared to white children. It's also common for autistic people to be misdiagnosed with things like anxiety or ADHD instead. That's not to say autistic people can't also have these. In fact, they frequently do. It's just more common for them to initially be diagnosed with everything under the sun except for autism. So what are the long-term effects of this kind of discrimination? Well, this is where individual oppression comes into play. Because of the way society has deemed autism as being bad, it's common for autistic people to mimic the body language and speech patterns of their neurotypical peers to try and pass as not being autistic. This is referred to as masking, and it can do some really nasty things to a person's mental health in the long run. Studies have shown that rates of depression and stress among autistic adults are significantly correlated with how often they tended to mask, along with how generally accepted they felt by society. You're probably sitting here right now thinking, oh my god, that's awful, but what in the world can I do to help? Actually, there's a lot of things you can do, be it big or small. First, be mindful of the language you use. Most autistic people generally prefer that you refer to them with identity-first language rather than terms like person with autism, but it's good to ask what they're more comfortable with. You can also uplift autistic voices. Make sure that you're getting your information either from autistic people themselves or autism advocates who have been in the field for years and are recognized in a good light by the autistic autistic community. There's so much more you can do to help, of course, but above all else, just remember that we're people too. Yes, autism can cause us a lot of trouble in our day-to-day functioning, but a cure isn't what we need. You don't need to erase us to help us. We just need to be accommodated.